What is going on with Red Bull? Now, notice how I specifically said Red Bull and not Max Verstappen, whose face is plastered all over the thumbnail. I mean, I have to get you guys to click somehow, you know?
Don't hate the player, hate the game.
To clarify, I still think Max is performing at an insane level. He just doesn't have the same car advantage as he did before. It's fascinating just how quickly things have turned around. Last year, they had a car with DRS so powerful that he could send an overtake from a different galaxy and pull ahead way before the braking zone.
And he just breezes down the inside. That looked like F1 against F2.
Even at the start of this season, they were untouchable. But this race right here is where a shift in the balance of power would alter the trajectory of the season forever. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but here goes nothing. Jos Verstappen was right.
You serious?
Yeah, I know I sound insane, but just hear me out. Remember those investigations surrounding Christian Horner back in March? Well, Mr. Moral Compass over here was like, the team is in danger of falling apart. Well, fast forward a few months later, and Red Bull have lost two big hitters. One being the legend himself, Adrian Newey, whose plans still remain unknown. And the other, more recently, being sporting director Jonathan Wheatley, who's going to Audi to become team principal. Jos Verstappen calling this shot is like that meme which goes, heartbreaking. The worst person you know just made a great point. It didn't end there. This man called out Horner for, quote, playing the victim when he's the one causing the problems. And I'm sat there reading this like, damn, who let bro cook? But anyway, Jonathan Wheatley to me felt like such a funny departure. Everyone's been talking about it like it's the start of Red Bull's downfall, when nobody really knows what his motives were. I mean, who wouldn't want to take on the role of team principal, am I right? Especially for someone like Wheatley who's been in Horner's shadow for so long. In fact, I'm convinced that Horner was low-key relieved about the news because had he been rightfully chucked out at the start of the season, it would have been Jonathan taking his position. This is what he said after the news dropped. I know Jonathan wants to go, why not? He's an expensive man whose salary allows me to employ a few more engineers. And while that's true, I guess, don't you think it's a little disrespectful to someone who's been there from the very beginning, helped build up the team into what it is today, literally convinced Michael Massey to break the rules? And speaking on that, I know Max must be trembling right now, because he can't pull off any more of those shenanigans and get Jonathan to just come save him anymore. Then, there's the rumours of them planning to promote from within and get his race engineer GP to split his duties, which is the last thing Max needs right now because he's going to need as much time with his race engineer as possible, especially now the competition is a lot stiffer. But even still, I don't think this is the end for Red Bull. At least, not yet. I still do believe that there is turmoil coming from within and that will eventually lead to their star driver walking away. And if that happens, I can officially say it's over. But this particular departure to me just seems like a man doing what's best for his career and his future in Formula 1. Well, wouldn't that imply that where he's at currently isn't good for his career? I mean, you could look at it that way. He probably knew he wasn't going to progress as much with Horner there, so decided to take on a new challenge. And then there's the other perspective, that he wasn't happy with the civil war going on and maybe foresaw a downward spiral ensuing. A spiral that has already begun with the cracks they've been showing in recent races. Last year, when we were in Belgium, Verstappen decided to do his annual how many laps will it take me to get to first challenge, starting from P6 this time instead of P14. And it was as easy as ever. He sliced his way through the field like a hot knife through butter, taking the nickname Flying Dutchman to a whole new level. But this season, starting from P11, he could only manage P4. Granted, that's still a really good comeback drive. He did as much as he possibly could. However, they're nowhere near as dominant as they were just a few months ago. The last time they had such a big advantage was China, where Max was in cruise control pretty much the entire time. Checo was also capable of finishing on the podium consistently, but in Miami, for the first time in a long time, they looked beatable. And I just know Max's dad must have been tweaking out that day, because there's no way his son went from leading by a country mile to hearing Crofty making puns about Donald Trump.
Norris trumps Verstappen!
So, how has Red Bull's dominance ended so quickly? Well, that can be attributed to a lot of factors. First, I'm going to address the most talked about reason. There was a Spanish commentator who started a dumpster fire saying that Red Bull were told by the FIA to remove some parts because they were illegal. And at the time, I thought this guy was just chatting rubbish. Like, he really pulled the sauce, trust me bro. But then recently, the FIA made some changes to the sporting and technical regulations, with the main point of interest being a ban put in place, specifically banning any system or mechanism which produces asymmetric braking torques. And without getting into too much technical jargon, basically, a team has been doing something sneaky with their braking system that's allowed them to gain better cornering performance. Now, the FIA obviously saw this and said, nah, we don't like that, and put a stop to it. Either to prevent an arms race between the teams, or they felt like it wasn't what they like to call in the spirit of the regulations. People usually feel one of two ways about this kind of thing, and it really just depends on who you're a fan of. If it's your favorite team, you'll likely be in the "why are the FIA banning innovation" camp. And if it's a team you absolutely despise, then you'll be in the "great, they've closed a loophole. Now my favorite team can catch up." Well, unless your favorite team is Ferrari, then yeah, things stay the same. Now the question is, who has been taking advantage of this loophole? A team that has recently seen their performance advantage diminish, or a team that has closed the gap to the leaders within a very short period of time? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There are some theories floating about that this could be a 2019 Ferrari situation, where from the outside, we see a team's pace disappear out of nowhere. And interestingly, Max has been complaining a lot about understeer lately. But hold on. Surely an F1 team wouldn't remove such an advantageous mechanism before it was officially deemed illegal, which wouldn't line up with the issues that Red Bull have been experiencing. Both cases could be made that it either could be or not be them. So what about McLaren or Mercedes? It could also be one of them, since they've gained a ton of performance in recent races. The funniest scenario though would be if it was Ferrari, given how they've completely fallen off the map. But I doubt it's them, since their issues were more related to porpoising. Or it's a team lower down the grid, and the status quo doesn't change among the top 4 teams. Who knows, maybe all the teams have been exploiting it, and when we get to Zandvoort, everyone is clotting into the barriers. Ultimately, we'll only know for sure once the summer break is over. Based on what we do know though, it seems as though this RB20 has a much narrower operating window compared to last year. That weekend in Miami, they didn't optimize their setup. Max also had some slight damage from clattering the bollard, and then the tyres. Tyres were a big problem for them. A combination of hot conditions alongside an unusual track surface meant that the tyres were prone to overheating. Then in Imola, as Max himself put it, as soon as I swapped to the hard tyre, the tyres just fell out of the operating window. It was like driving on ice. In fact, the balance was so bad that Verstappen said he nearly ended up in the grandstands. He did very well to drive around the issue though, taking less conventional lines and essentially just trying to survive the attack from Norris. What helped a lot that weekend was the rear wing that they had fitted, as it enabled them to be a lot faster down the straights compared to anyone else. Coming off the back of Miami with a McLaren win and it being backed up by a late charge at the end in Imola was great to see. Finally, another team actually had a car capable of challenging Red Bull consistently for race wins. But it's weird how this was the second time now, particularly during the final stint of a race, the Red Bull would fall off and the McLaren would come alive. Before the safety car in Canada, again, Max didn't have the pace to compete with the Mercedes or the McLaren, but once he got into clean air, he could control the race as he pleased. However, I'm convinced that the McLaren was the best car on the day, and the Mercedes was at least on par with the Red Bull. But it was just a very chaotic Grand Prix. And not to take away from the great performance that Verstappen put together, but this was more about others losing the race that they should have won. Lewis had a scrappy race, George the same, and McLaren should have anticipated a safety car given where Sargent had crashed and put on a new set of inters. The Red Bull was very competitive, but not the best car that weekend. But a combination of cool heads on the pit wall and Max's driving made the difference. Spain was a similar story. Max did an amazing job, but it was more about Lando fumbling the bag. And then the next few races were extremely close again, but it once again brings about the question, how was their massive advantage eradicated so quickly? Have they hit a plateau with their car development? That's something Newey was fearful of at the start of the season. There was always going to be a point of convergence with these regulations. Maybe it's just come a lot sooner than we expected. Then, there's the reduced wind tunnel time due to winning the Constructors' Championship. Not only that, they've struggled with correlation issues with their latest upgrades, something that Mercedes had trouble with in 2022 and 2023. That could also be having an impact. And if it is, then it might be an idea to intentionally lose the Constructors to get that benefit of extra wind tunnel time. Oh wait, they're already way ahead of me there by keeping Checo. Well, actually, they were about to make a driver swap, but Liberty Media said, "We need that Mexico money, so do whatever you can to keep this guy." I can imagine Max must be losing his patience, because not only is he getting quadruple teamed by a rejuvenated Hamilton, a desperate Norris, an improving Piastri, and a literal war criminal, but also Red Bull are telling him no more late night sim racing, as well as the FIA telling him to stop swearing on the radio, and more sprint races, plus Zandvoort and Spa alternating every year. And finally, all of his main boys are jumping ship. Yeah, all of that retirement talk from last year might be coming sooner than we expected. Or he could go to Mercedes in 2026, which is an entirely different video in itself. But we'll leave it at that for now. Let me know what you think about Red Bull's sudden end to their dominance, what the causes are behind it, and whether this is the start of a potential downfall. Be sure to like if you enjoyed, share the video with friends, and subscribe to the channel if you're new to get my latest videos in the future. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.